Leadership and Yoga fam. Today I am bringing you an episode with a yoga teacher that I've been trying to chase down for an interview. I've heard about her all over the Seattle yoga community. I've heard about her online, and I've also heard about her from some of you who have actually requested an interview with her. So this is Harps, and if you are a yoga teacher, you are in for an inspirational episode because she brings 15 years of yoga teaching experience. And we also talk a lot about the impact side of yoga and getting beyond just our individual practice, and a little spoiler, even beyond just our yoga practice and into other things that we can be doing as yoga practitioners and yogis. So if you are listening to this episode, I do have an ask. If you would be willing to just take a moment to drop me a rating for my podcast and also to subscribe to my show. The biggest form of help and support that you can really give me is to share this episode with a fellow yoga curious friend or a fellow yoga teacher friend of yours, or perhaps even on social media as well. And before we get into the episode, if you are a fellow yoga teacher, I will also tell you that if this has been the year that you said, I will set up a website for myself, or that I will get my offers or my courses or my classes up online. Right now, Offering Tree has a free trial, so you can try it out, no strings attached. The link to try this out is in the show notes. And if you're like me, this is a good little moment to pause, and you can actually go and click the link in the show notes so that it will email you to remind you, so that you can take that first step to setting up your business with Offering Tree. Offering Tree is one of my trusted advisors. They are a platform that I use myself, and it's an all-in-one software platform for yoga teachers, studio owners, and even coaches. So maybe go check that out if that's that little nudge that you need to get that set up. With that said, sit back, relax, but also lean in. Today on the Leadership and Yoga podcast, Harps. So I like to start my in-person interviews with a deep breath, and if you're listening, you can take that with us if you would like to. Harps, welcome to the Leadership and Yoga podcast.
Thank you. I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I feel like I've been trying to chase you down for a while now.
That's honestly pretty accurate. My return rate for text messages or emails is like, you're either going to get me in 30 seconds or 3 to 10 business days.
Yeah.
There's no in between.
Yeah, it's a good way to roll. But yeah, I mean, for real, I've heard your name around in the Seattle yoga community for years. I've heard your name around online. And then I started hearing your name from listeners asking literally for an interview with you, one of the requested interviews for the Leadership and Yoga podcast. So I figured it's about time we make it happen. So appreciate you taking this time to chat with us today.
Yeah, this was a great connection. I love having mutual friends, especially in the yoga world. Shout out to Brandon for the voice note. Voice note's very effective always.
Yeah, exactly.
So, yeah, that's all it took.
So I wanted to talk to you today about all things yoga and all things teaching yoga specifically. We have lots of fellow yoga teachers on the podcast and that listen to the podcast. So if you're listening, you are a yoga teacher, 15 years of teaching experience. And as we're just chatting before the show, I have like 4. So I'm a little bit of a baby yoga teacher, and I'm here to learn and to listen as well. But I wanted to start off by asking you just about yoga specifically. And so if you literally close your eyes and you think about yoga, what comes to mind? What do you see?
I will say, so one of my very best friends, Jasmine, is a yoga teacher too. And she says when she steps on her mat, she closes her eyes, she can hear God. And I have always been a little jealous of that.
Yeah.
That idea. The first time she said it, I was like, oh, you do? I've never heard God. I'm like, what?
What does that sound like?
What does God sound? What does she sound like? And I think that there's this big expectation that it should be this thing, or I close my eyes and I'm like, oh, peace. And I don't know that I have that so much, but the way I've always interpreted, or the way that I've made peace with that experience that she's had.
Yeah.
Because a lot of times when I close my eyes and think about it, it's just like an onslaught of rabble of chitta-vritti in there.
Yeah.
So I kind of just, in a more like monoist way, assume that maybe that is God. Maybe that is like, you know, that your own rabble, your own rumination is, I mean, not all of it's true. Like some of it's just a mess, but other stuff is like maybe worth paying attention to. So a lot of times when I close my eyes, I think about yoga. It goes from really loud to hopefully at some point a little quieter, but like just being able to manage the volume knob.
Yeah.
Seems to be like where it goes, you know?
I like that answer because often, people do think of something big and profound and deep, and at times it's not that. And yet you come back.
Yes.
So I'd ask you why then.
Yeah, because it makes sense. If you hear God every time you get on the mat, like, absolutely.
I
I'd be on
would
my
be
mat
there.
every single, we would have no issues with adherence or attrition or anything if that was the case. And I think that's amazing, empowering, and again, envious.
Yeah.
And at the same time, you know, often like the magic is in the mundane, like the just showing up or the self-trust of like, yeah, man, I didn't hear anything. Like I didn't hear anything and I'm still going to do it again tomorrow. And I think that is no more or less like valuable or worthwhile of a reason. But I do think it's a very real thing that sometimes we have expectations of like grandiose, I am doing yoga. And sometimes we're just like, yeah, man, I'm just going to do my best.
Do you remember when you started establishing yourself a consistent yoga routine? I mean, what was that like to set that up for you?
You know, I would say that I am not a person who is explicitly consistent at anything.
Okay.
Like I am I very much like an all or nothing type of person. So I am like all in, hyper focused. This is my whole identity. Like I've learned how to cross stitch. So I'm like, I'm going to start an Etsy shop. Like I'm so all in with things. Or I go the opposite direction. I'm like, just can barely get myself to even consider the possibility of it. And so for me, consistency in the yoga practice has gone through huge waves. Like even just starting it, you know, you go through that high of you're like, I found this thing and it feels
the
so
honeymoon
good.
phase.
And you're like, I got to do it. I'm going to do a 30-day challenge. I'm going to do this. I'm going to that. And then, you know, there is the thing that comes with all or nothing, which is usually burnout. So I feel like for me, it's always been in seasons. It doesn't mean that I'm not on my mat, but what it looks like or feels like or what it consists of has been wildly different over the last 20 years, right? I think my real deepest consistency was in my 20s where I was in, you know, a little bit more of the like, I don't want to say heyday, but a little bit of like public class heyday where all the classes were 90 minutes and you could find that. And so that was a time like where getting on my mat was easier because there was a little bit more structure around it, as opposed to when everything got shorter and you pick up more classes and you teach more, you know, your practice looks different.
I'm curious about that ability that you have then to sort of trust yourself. It sounds like you trust yourself to step away and to know that you can come back if you want to, or that you can fill in something that you used to do forever with an actually totally different thing. And I'm starting to go through this.
You are?
Yeah,
Okay.
Absolutely. After, 3 years of really consistent practice, especially in the Ashtanga and Rocket world, I've found actually, okay, my body needs for a couple of months this other kind of practice. And there's almost like this nagging guilt.
Oh, absolutely.
How do you deal?
Well, I just think there's so much identity wrapped up in this practice. Like for a good reason, and it's not a bad thing.
Yeah.
Like identity is such a powerful part of change and motivation and what we do and why we do it. But it also means that when you don't do it, you're not just not doing the thing, you're not doing the thing.
Yeah.
Like it's an identity crisis a little bit. And I think that's, at least for me, usually a solid shame spiral about like, well, do I not even like this thing? Is this not me anymore? Is this whatever? Why don't I need it? And I think that, one, it's natural to go through that with anything. Like just because it's yoga doesn't mean it's different from like all the other reactions to stuff in your life. And at the same time, when you do really intense practices like Rocket and like Ashtanga, and again, I've come from seasons of really intense practices, spent a lot of time down in LA in, big inversion, heavy, like more intense. And they were almost always filled by seasons of absolute rejection and me being like, you know what? I'm not doing more than 2 push-ups a day. I'm not doing it. I don't care. I'm doing restorative yoga. I'm doing yin. I spent a couple years just reeling from like, no, it's like that little defiant kid inside you that's like, I don't have to.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if it's trust that it could come back. It's more, at least for me, like the need to prove to myself that I'm still doing it. Like that's such a powerful motivator for me that like, I'm still that thing. Yeah, I'm back on my mat. And then after like a little bit, I'm like, oh, wait, I like it here.
Uh-huh.
Oh, I'm happy to be here. What was I rallying against so hard? But trust is hard.
It is.
Like so hard.
Yeah.
So I don't know if I would even call it trust as much as like a need to try to establish that trust to myself through the action of it.
Yeah, this is fascinating what you say about the identity, because it's exactly what I did. You know, about 5 years ago, I looked at the Instagram yogis and I said, hey, that looks pretty good. I want to be doing things like that. And I was in my cubicle and, you know, and now I'm here. And it's funny because I feel like I've not even admitted this on the podcast before, but I've literally considered a rebrand away from just leadership and yoga because I feel that yoga, it was like constraining me. But I mean, yoga isn't everything. Not everything is yoga, but you can find yoga in everything, right? But it's like that need to say, oh, I am a rocket yogi, or I am X. This is who I am. This is what I like. That's so satisfying to us.
It's so satisfying. I also think it creates this like really like, I don't know, this like happy place of belonging.
Yes.
Of feeling like this is what I do. It's like when we introduce ourselves and the first thing we do is tell people what our job is and what we do. Yeah. And it's like, yeah, you spend a lot of your time doing it. So sometimes you're like, am I a video editor and not a yoga teacher? Like, is that what I do now?
Yeah.
You know, and so I think that it's easy to then let that identity like burrow its way down into the center of yourself. And it like clings on pretty damn tight in the yoga world, I think. Yeah. There is also, like, think about any other physical endeavor. You don't go into CrossFit or like an F45 and be like, I'm going to do this till I die. You know what I mean? But like we start yoga and we're like, you can do yoga till you're 100. So like the expectation is forever. Like that's built in without you even realizing it. And that's a tough go because like forever can't be the measure of success.
Yeah.
Nothing is forever. So if that's our measure of success, we're going to set ourselves up for disappointment and shame every single time that we evolve or change, or even if we just like shift a millimeter to the right for however long.
What do you think some of the other main misconceptions are about yoga that we often hear out in the world when we're newer and we're coming into a yoga practice? What are the main misconceptions that we hear?
I think that, I don't know if I think it's a misconception, but I think it's maybe had some bad marketing that like yoga's gonna heal you or fix you. You know what I mean? Like as a teacher, I think we've all had students ask us questions that we're like, oh shit, I'm not equipped to answer that. When like, oh my God, absolutely not. But you're like, I should try to answer it. And it's like, you shouldn't try,
you
right?
Should not, yeah.
And I think that we've all gone into it thinking like, okay, this is gonna like, I'm gonna fix my marriage. I'm going to lose 10 pounds. I'm going to start a morning routine. I'm a 6 a.m. yogi. I'm going to be flexible. I'm going to touch my toes. I'm going to cure my back pain. I'm going to become a vegan. Like we have these lofty expectations. And I think that that's part of like what we've projected on yoga, right? A sort of like Orientalism of like, this thing that that is mystical can heal me. It's a little bit of faith, which isn't a bad thing. But I also think it's kind of the marketing of like, this is part of a larger philosophy and system, which is what makes it so powerful and what like makes that power very weighty, right? Yeah. And so I think the idea that it's going to heal you is a tough one, or fix you, because like also yoga's not going to make you a better person. Like it's just going to make you more of what you already are. So it, you know, it might entrench you further into things. It might put you in a more sort of individualistic place, or it might bring out something else. But I think sometimes a practice like yoga that can be hyper-individualistic, and it can often, you know, illuminate things that are distinctly unhealed.
Yeah.
You know? So
absolutely. And it's your choice when you're confronted with that, what you do with it. It's not necessarily that 5 sun A's and 5 sun B's are going to wipe that clean. I'm clear.
It would be lovely,
clean
though.
slate,
it would be so nice.
Pure. I want us to talk about this, like you said, hyper-individualistic nature tendency sometimes that comes in with yoga. And I want, if you wouldn't mind just explaining that, because I'm understanding what you're saying. And this is something that truthfully before like maybe a year or two ago, I had never really thought about it because I was in that state of, I was in a really low state and I was like, I just want to feel better. And I was grasping for the yoga as a lifeline. And what you find is that, you know, you pull on the rope, there's nothing really there. It's actually you, you know, it's surprise, spoiler alert,
Surprise,
it's actually you behind the curtain.
Yeah.
But still, once you get there, there's always something more to fix. You know, there's always the goalpost is always being moved on you. If you can get a little deeper into the back bend or a little bit happier, a little bit more stable of a life, you know? So how do we move away from focusing on the individual sense that we get in the yoga and into something maybe a little bit broader?
Yeah.
Or what is it? You know, if not the individual, what?
Well, I think it's a good question because like you know, this practice is, in theory, the way that we all interpret it, is this path for self-realization and self-liberation and all this. And it's these practices that stem from, you know, a lot of sort of like purity worship and this place of getting ourselves to morally right. And I think that it's easy to idealize that stuff. And we idealize it for us personally, because also most of us grow up with this like that same kind of shame and blame of like, I'm the problem, I need to fix it, whether we can take responsibility or not or whatever, like usually at the core we're like something's going on here, right? And so yoga is this place that feels like agency, right? You get on the mat and you're like, I'm gonna do the practice, and all I have to do, it is like one of the beautiful things about it is how approachable it is. You just get on your mat, you just do the practice, and then you just do it again, and you just do it again, and you see what happens. And at the same time, I think it's really risky because the path to self-realization looks also like a lot like the path to self-obsession. And it's hard for me or anyone else to say maybe which detour, which fork in the road that you've taken if you don't have a strong sense of collectivism and community support, like entrenched in who you are and where you practice and the teachers you practice with and the version of yoga, especially like modern postural yoga, the version of it that you engage with, it's either gonna send you towards self-obsession, like not necessarily an inherently problematic way, but definitely not where you thought you were heading, right? I think that we put yoga books on the shelf in the self-improvement section.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's an interesting approach to think that, you know, this is just another box to tick on our path to being like a more composed, more positive, effective manifester or whatever it is. You know, I think we often miss that collectiveness of like the idea that like there is no self-liberation without collective liberation. We can't leave our neighbors behind. Like and so then we do this practice where we're alone on our mat and then we're told eyes on your own mat, don't worry about what other people are doing. And I think there's a lot of unspoken constraints or like unspoken programming conditioning that just comes from the mechanisms of this practice that are both beautiful and impactful when you need to go inward. And also sometimes they put the blinders on us for a really long time when we do this practice, that if you're told don't look around the room, don't worry about other people, eyes on your own mat, well then what does that tell you when you get off the mat, right? I think it's the same programming and conditioning that we're trying to strip away with the practice, that we have this corporal punishment sort of like military complex that is in there just by the default of like how we do it.
I had never thought about that.
Sorry.
But now that I think about it,
it's hard to unthink about it.
It is, because I understand the intention of it. Like, don't compare yourself, basically.
The core of it is beautiful.
Yeah, but I also feel like, especially in a lot of Western culture, comparison and competitive is the baseline. Like, that is what you're getting, a class full of people who have grown up with that as their operating system throughout school. But I mean, you did team sports, right?
I did a lot of team sports. I am also at my core an extremely competitive person. I do not like to lose. It is one of the hardest things about yoga for me is that like there are times where, I mean, most of the time I need like some oomph and some intensity. And, you know, that competition I think is I like that ferocity side of myself, but also it is something that I need to temper and balance with a practice like yoga, right?
Oh yeah, I agree. It's incredibly socially motivating. I love to be in a room where I look around and there's like 40 other people in a handstand and I'm like, it's just normal. It's nothing special.
Yeah,
you
you're
know?
like, everyone's doing it.
Yeah, everybody's doing it. It's nothing special. And it kind of like knocks you down in that sense where you just realize like, wow, this is a total capability that all these other humans have alongside me. But I'm curious if you think that could we bring the team aspect more into a yoga class? I mean, is that the answer?
I don't know if I think that's the answer. I think one of the lovely soothing things about yoga is the like quietude that's hard to find other places in your life, depending on what your life looks like. It might involve a lot of quiet, and it might involve a lot of children or a job that's demanding or whatever it is, or a busy city. And so I think that's the sort of like sanctuary of it. And I think if we just were to even talk about like the studio environment, if a studio doesn't have a lobby where people can mill and chat and get to know each other, then there isn't a lot of opportunity to have a team energy, a group energy. And when we have a setup that is like teacher and student, we have this hierarchical thing that's just built into it. And I think depending on the lineage and where you come from in it, that has different dynamics. But it's real tough to have a good camaraderie, team energy when you have one coach or one person at the pinnacle, the top of the pyramid, right? So I think like just by the nature of the structure of this practice, the way that it is done, from a lineage perspective, makes that tough. I don't think it's impossible. I think it becomes more the job of the collective community. It becomes the role of the teachers to foster that. Like, it means that you have to knock yourself down a peg as the teacher and rise your students up to meet, and kind of reduce the threat threshold that your students might surpass you, and that would be okay, and that's the goal.
Yeah. How can we do that? I mean, I know there's so many different ways, but especially for newer teachers, I mean, what is like one tangible example of making a move in that direction?
I think as a new teacher, there is this tendency we all want, like, okay, I grew up I played a lot of competitive sports growing up, but I also was a cheerleader. And there is the guidance that I have gotten from every cheer coach my entire life, which was fake it till you make it.
Yeah.
Right. It's the idea of like, put on a smile. Like, we know that it's hour 6. You've been at Heck Ed for, the entire day, and you're ready to go home. Fake it till you make it. You got 1 hour left. Right. And I think that is valuable. And I think it's advice that has carried me through many seasons of my life where I'm like, get it together, darling. And I think as a new teacher, it is tempting to like fake it till you make it and turn on this like we talked about at the beginning, I am yoga and I'm doing this thing. And sort of we want to project this air of knowingness. And I also think we do ourselves and sometimes our students a disservice by not acknowledging just like where we're at. Like, sometimes you are in the seat of the mentor, like you've been down the path and you have guidance to offer. And sometimes you're in the seat of the companion. And I feel like if more people could, like for me, a class feels really good when a teacher is in their companion. Like they're in it with me. They're not talking over me. We're in this experience together. And that makes me feel like there's a reason I came to this class. Because otherwise, if no one's going to be in it with me, then like I could have just done this at home. And so I think a lot of times this sense of like being in the muck with people, as hard as that is or as vulnerable as it is to be like, I'm a teacher who also doesn't know what they're doing and is, trying to just kind of wade through it. There's just a sweet spot between instilling confidence in your students that you know what you're doing, and also like being honest and clear and on the same wavelength with them that you are also a student of this practice and that you don't have all the answers. Like one of the most powerful things I think you can say as a teacher is just like, man, I don't know. That's so interesting. I'd love to find out more.
That takes more confidence than pretending that you do know in a lot of cases. It's interesting because what I'm hearing from you is it's a gray area because you want people to feel held by your confidence and not worried and nervous for you, right? There's been many cases, especially even when you're watching a public speaker, where you're kind of like rooting for them because you're so nervous. You're like secondhand nervous for them. So that is distracting. But on the other hand, it's also distracting when it's like this overbearing sort of confidence and this inability to ever say, hey, actually, I don't believe what I used to say. Like, I'm going to change my mind.
Yeah.
I learned something more, and I'm going to give you guys the actual truth, not just pretend to continue to do what I've always done,
Yeah. I think it's really hard to know the difference between like humility or humanizing yourself, and then also at the same time, it can break down the confidence in a teacher if it's too much, or like, yeah, man, I don't know, this is my first class, I don't know what I'm doing. Like, nobody wants to hear that. But at the same time, your students are rooting for you. Like, they want you to teach a great class. They want this to be a delightful experience. And so I think as a teacher, like, there is always this sweet spot, this like Goldilocks in between of, you're doing the thing. And every time you teach, like, you can't control the entire room. Like, you can feel when a teacher is like, I had a plan. Like, everything is like grasped really tightly. And I've definitely been that teacher in many seasons of my career and my practice. But I think that if we want to create an ecosystem in yoga that leads more to collectivism and like off the mat sort of like embodiment of this practice, as opposed to just like this personal ascension, then we have to start with like those experiences with your students, whether it's in person or online or whatever.
Yeah.
There is this humanism of like talking to your students, like teaching to them, know their names, speak to them, get down with them. I spend most of my classes like crouched like a shortstop, like down low or sitting on the ground, just because like if everyone is down in locust pose and you're standing and parading around the room, like there's like a literal actual change in elevation that is perceptible. So I think it requires you to just like kind of be in it. Like, you don't, the idea that we are going to immediately, especially as new teachers, be a mentor is just sort of like akin to skipping the entire hero's journey. And you're just like, that's it, Voldemort's gone, we're done. It's like Harry had way more to do before he got there. So living in this kind of companion and stewarding, like walking alongside people, goes a long way, because most people could use a companion.
Absolutely. Yeah. And when you're speaking about this power dynamic and being a good leader, essentially, and I can feel us moving towards talking about yoga and impact and the collective and all of that. And I know you share a lot about that, so we will get to that. But I want to bring us just a little bit deeper into the actual yoga class and teaching before we get to that. But in your opinion, what makes an exceptional yoga class?
I think it's the things we were just talking about, that like companion with me thing. I think it's that. For me, it's also some level of intention or purpose behind it. And that's not to say that it has to be like, this immaculate, all the I's dotted and T's crossed type of sequence. But I do feel that there is something like in the air in a class when things make sense. Like when you can feel, you're at minute 30 and you're like, what is going on here? And then you're at minute 42 and you're like, oh, that's what was happening. Okay, that thing we did at minute 4, it makes sense. Like for me, that like tugging of the threads all the way through class just feels so soothing to my like nervous system, because it provides like a container of, we're doing the thing, we're coming to practice. And it's not just willy-nilly. Like
it feels intentional.
Yeah, there's nothing wrong with willy-nilly, but at least for me, I find it very soothing to have a plan. And so I like that when I take class, that I can feel that the teacher had like thoughts behind it, that there was an intention behind it.
Yeah, I think we recognize on so many different levels that element of symmetry too is something sort of sacred about that. Yeah. So I would agree with you, understand that. What about in terms of cues? This is sort of a hot topic of people say, oh, never cue this or always cue this. But I'm curious if you could share with us, because over 15 years, right, probably a lot changes in the way that you're teaching yoga. But maybe what's something that you used to say that you would never say anymore? And then we'll do the inverse as well.
So many things. So many things. It's truly like the perils of putting anything in writing or on video is like the second you do it, you could be wrong. You know what I mean? It's like the nature of change or of research or of anything is that the second you're committed to it, like the only thing that is constant is change, right? So absolutely. I mean, I would say that I used to live much more in a land of absolutes, of this is the way, like very Mandalorian, like this is the way. And I come from teachers and lineages that had a little bit more strict alignment principles, beliefs that took me a while. I would say my first like 7 years, 8 years of teaching, I still have big thoughts, but I had big thoughts, like especially for a baby teacher, about the way bodies should move or poses should look or what should be happening in them.
Mm-hmm.
And as a person who's pretty strong in their conviction, like in general, that really translated to my classes and my cues as well. There's tons of time that I spend in my own teacher trainings being like, okay, if you took this class from me on allo in 2013, I would say disregard 50% of what I'm saying, because once we know better, we do better.
Yeah.
And cues, things like don't use your glutes and back bends, stuff like that has come up through many different styles of yoga and for many different reasons. I think there are a lot of instances where as teachers we have to say, I get why the intention behind that or why it was happening.
Yeah.
And we know that's not appropriate or helpful for the students and it's not biomechanically sound. And therefore, I'm going to learn more and I'm going to change my approach to this. Because like just being wrong is just not that serious.
Mm-hmm.
But being wrong and not changing or doing anything about it, that is pretty serious, right?
Yeah. No, it's interesting because I almost feel like some cues I've found across different traditions almost feel more like it's more like a mudra aspect of it. It's like it's a expression for that purpose of the expression. It's not necessarily biomechanically sound.
Yes.
And that always strikes the question in my mind, well, does that make it wrong or does that make it right? But if we're talking about injuries, of course, there's something to be thinking about there. Mm-hmm. So I want to address this question too of the fear a lot of times when we start teaching that, okay, students will become injured in class if we don't say the whole list of cues or we don't give disclaimers every time. How do you draw that line?
This is such a great question because I completely agree that like so much of the cueing and universal anything is so lineage dependent and it's very much like there's always a method to the madness. Yeah. And if you're not inside the method, you might not understand the madness. But like if you're inside it, you're like, that's why we do it that way. Mm-hmm. And I think that's very valid until we get to the place of like managing the fact that at the core, for most, not all, but for many people, you're teaching a primarily asana class, right? And that means you're teaching a primarily physical class. So to disregard the realities of physical bodies, I think does do a disservice to students in the room, unless you can provide really good caveats where we do it this way because this, right? And I think it's really important. What is tough often, and also just like the dynamics of teaching a group class and the time constraints of it all, is if you don't give people a why, it's really hard to expect them to be invested in what you're saying, right? You're just do this. Guruji says, just do this. There are many lineages where that's the way it works. For me, that's a tough sell, right? I was always a kid that was like, but why? But why? But why, right? And that's not changed as an adult. So when it comes to cueing and injuries and things like that, I have the same approach. Like, if you'd like me to do it that way, I'll absolutely do it. When I go back to some of my teachers' classes, my one teacher, Annie Carpenter, who I adore with my whole heart, but she does things differently than I do. But when I take her class, will I do them her way? Yes, I will.
Yes.
Because I know why she's teaching them that way. I know that her philosophy on things, it's not the way I teach. But is anything horrific going to happen in this 90 minutes? No, I'll be fine. I can manage myself, right? I'm an adult.
Yeah.
And so there's this like sweet spot between this desire to keep yourself or your students safe, and also knowing that in a class, what's happening in that instance is probably very unlikely to be the thing that injures you or a student, right? Most of the time, I think as teachers, we say all those things, we rattle off a million alignment cues to keep people safe because we want that. And at the same time, we neglect to acknowledge that this is 1 hour of their day. Yeah. You have no idea what people did with the other 23 hours. Do they have a young child and they have not slept for 3 years? Do they have multiple young children? Have they not slept for the last 7, 8 years, right? Are they eating? Are they working? Did they just come from a desk job and this is their 1 hour a week? Like, it is just a much larger conversation. And I think I actually try really hard not to ever describe my teaching or my classes as safe.
Yeah.
Because one, it's not up to me to decide what's safe for someone else. Mm-hmm. That's an internal conversation, right? And two, like the audacity of me to think that I could in this prevent something. I can mitigate, I can do my best, but I cannot claim.
Almost dangerous to say that you will keep people safe by the cues that you provide in a way, because it takes away the own responsibility of how they're feeling within the body.
Yeah. I think it's just like a balance, like everything between, you know, you don't want, it's not a blame, onus, everything on the student, you know, when they're coming to you for guidance and you're in this place of authority. And simultaneously, I think with your teaching and everything else that you offer as a teacher outside of just like physical cues is the environment that you create. If you have to say, I am a safe teacher, this is a safe space, to me, that's a red flag, because you shouldn't have to tell me that. I should feel that. Your teaching, your class, your sequencing, your everything should ooze that. But if you have to say, I teach safe yoga, it makes me wonder, well, then what are we deeming unsafe yoga? Because at least like, even not from a philosophical standpoint, but physically, like, I don't think that there are necessarily unsafe movements, but there are movements that your body and your tissues probably aren't prepared for, or maybe aren't, or maybe are, right? It's really about a lack of or ability to prepare for, to train things for tolerance levels, and to assume that I can control that with a few cues about your knee is like, I think as a teacher, you're also setting yourself up for a real interesting internal conversation when someone does get hurt in your class.
Yeah.
Or if you've had an injury, as many of us who have practiced for a long time have, you get hurt and you're like, but I did it right. I did all the things. Most of my biggest yoga injuries happened when I was following all the rules. I'm a very good rule follower, and I was doing all the things, and shit happens. And there are other things that are a part of it that had nothing to do with my teacher or even necessarily me. It was just like, oof, like, you know, the load outweighed the capacity of that tissue at that moment.
Yeah.
And I think it's when you do everything right and you still don't get the outcome you wanted, that's like another identity crisis in the whole thing.
It is. And I know it's hard to speak generally because everybody's body is so different, but in general, what do we need more of as yogis and as yoga practitioners? You know, what other training, what other movements have you found have been really helpful and beneficial?
Yeah, I think a lot of times with yoga, because it is this like whole heart, whole life discipline, and we expect it to heal all the things, we also then put the onus on yoga to heal an injury or anything else. And what's challenging about that is that when it comes to tissue adaptation or the timelines for that or the loading strategies, there are just some limitations to what we can do with body weight and what we can do, especially in the container of, say, a group class or that type of work. And so I think for people who are like career yogis and it's all we've done for a very long time, I think sometimes you don't even have a sense of what you're missing in your body or your functionality because you do yoga. And in yoga, we move in a million different directions and you do things that are hard. You're like, but I do rocket. Like, what do you mean I need more? You don't get to a rocket class and be like, I have more to give, right? Like, you're toast. And so it feels confusing to think that there could be gaps in your physicality. But in reality, it's not necessarily a fault. It's just like the structure of yoga that if we're not going to add outside load or different resistance profiles, then we quite literally can't get the tissues to adapt. Because when it comes to injuries, like the number one injury, like what do you think the number one injury is after an ACL tear? It's an ACL tear.
Another one.
It's another ACL tear. Like, when we injure a tissue, the most likely injury we're going to have again is the same thing. Why? Because we need to rehab that tissue, not just to where it was when it got hurt, because that's where it got hurt. You need to rehab it to a new level, to a different place, right? And a lot of us, we just want things to feel back to normal so we can get back to our practice. We want to do the thing. We want to be done with this. It's annoying. It's a frustration. It's a distraction. And we forget that this is not, it's not like the pain is your teacher thing, or like, I don't think that pain is a requirement to learn lessons on any level. But I do think that there is an honesty that we have to have with like, nothing can be everything, right? And the yoga practice is no less beholden to that truth than anything else. So when it comes to injuries or just understanding like what your body feels like, how it could feel, it does sometimes really help to get off your mat and try other stuff and be like, oh, okay. Maybe in yoga, it's really beneficial to have, from, you know, the practice that most of us ascribe to, more movement, more flexibility, more space. And we're like, I want to get into this deep pose. And I don't want to necessarily, it's kind of like glorified to not even feel it. Like, it's like I could just do it, right? There's a sufficiency value in yoga. And then you go into a place of strength training or other things, and it's like intentionally hard. It's not efficient. Let's put more weight on there. Let's make it more of a slog. Let's get more speed, more power. And in yoga, we're saying, let's reduce the momentum. Let's control it. Like nothing out of place in this perfect little box that's the temperature's controlled. There's no wind. There's no outside factors. And so I think for a lot of yogis, like we're all serviced to just try or do or engage in other types of movement that challenge you in a novel way or ask different things of your tissues, whether it's you like bouldering and rock climbing and you get that pull that we don't get, or rotator cuffs on our shoulders that yoga just, you can love it all you want, but you can't get that, right? Or whether it's getting under a barbell and like loading your skeleton and really trying to build those tissues up. There are a lot of reasons why a multidisciplinary approach is going to hopefully be the thing that keeps you on your mat till you're 100.
What has been your journey? Because I associate you with yoga and weightlifting, actually, and just being in the gym in general.
Yeah.
But what has been your journey with yoga and weightlifting? Did you add weightlifting later on? Did weightlifting come first? What was it like?
I mean, like I said, I've always been a physical person. Yeah. Like I grew up, I'm a younger sibling, but I was raised, and my older brother ingratiated me to like the ways of, Steve Austin 316 and the people's elbow. And I lived in a lot of like body slam, WWE type of like childhood. So I've always been like a physical person that's comfortable in that.
Yeah.
I'm a person who's very comfortable in the like sort of shoot the shit environment of a gym because of my time in athletics. And I've always been a person who's like, that just feels like a safe space to me, right? And the yoga studio space has actually been a harder place for me to feel comfortable in because the lack of the like
interesting
shoot the shit environment.
Yeah, it's more serious at times, right?
More serious, and it is a little bit less, I would say the lack of lightheartedness, even if people are really actually delightful and lighthearted, there is not the same level of just infectiousness just because of the Zen environment, And so for me, I've always felt really comfortable in those environments, in gyms and stuff. And so I think I really came back to strength training after my daughter. Like after I had my daughter, I just felt, as you do, as one does, really wobbly. I felt out of sorts and I felt very out of body. Like when you are pregnant or have a child, there is this really almost existential crisis of my body is not my own.
Really?
This doesn't belong to me in both a really beautiful way.
Yeah.
Like sharing my body with her is just like one of the most like could make me cry memories of my entire life. And simultaneously the 2 years after of being like nothing belongs to me, right?
Wow.
Like I don't have agency. I don't have the control that I want. I don't have the sleep that I want. There's so much of that. And or at least I don't think I realized how attached I was to my body.
Yeah.
Until those moments where I was like, I can't do what I want. I don't feel strong enough. I don't feel stable enough. And so it kind of brought me back by way of mobility and my mobility coaches and my work through FRC, my coach Hunter, where I was like, okay, I'm going to start doing more kin stretch every week. And I'm going to start this. And, mobility at its core is also just strength training. We're just applying load differently, using different tools, but it's still strength training. And it just brought back this like level of capacity and capability that I didn't even know I was missing. Like the confidence in your body to be like, I can just do that. And the change in your hormones and in your like literal from the inside outness of energy that I wish I could say, and I feel there is like a level of a little bit of guilt in saying it. I wish I could say yoga does that for me, but it just doesn't.
Yeah.
Right, from an awesome perspective. Like the ability to sometimes get out of your head and into your body, but not by way of silence, but by way of like, I don't need to hear this shit all the time. So like, I don't need another hour by myself in silence in my head if I'm already getting that at 3 a.m. with my daughter when everyone else is asleep and I would like to be, right? We don't need to chat in there anymore. What I kind of need sometimes is like to throw some heavy shit around and it to be loud and me to be like out of that, And so there's something that is from a physical capability, but also like a mental balance that for me, the strength training, it brings me back to like times of athletics and group training and stuff like that. That is just such a lovely balance from an energetic perspective and physically.
Exactly. And I think what you're describing of, it's bringing you this energy, right? And I think there are a lot of us out there who are looking to feel a little bit more energized. I think we say we want to feel better, we want to feel healthier, stronger, this or that. But at the end of the day, I think it can all boil down to energy, and not even necessarily like crazy hyped energy, but like energy moving in our bodies, you know, the mental energy to be able to do big creative projects, whatever it is that you want to do. But what would you say to somebody who is saying, yeah, that's how I want to feel, but what you've just described, I don't even know where to start, right? And this happens, we have sort of like this wellness overload of overwhelm of all the different things that we could do that would maybe make us feel better, but what do we choose? Where do we start?
This is like the $1 million question, because I do think there is the saturation of like, well, I could do anything. And maybe that provides you some freedom, or it provides you like some panic. You're like, I could do anything. So like, tell me what to do, right?
Yeah.
And for me, like at the core, if I'm trying to suss out how I want to move, or if I'm to tell someone else what might be, I usually just rein it back to like, when was the last time you felt capable in your body? When was the last time you felt joy in your movement, like truly enjoyed it? And I have one student, Jade, who I adore. We had this conversation, and we were, you know, in sessions, and she lives over in the UK, and she's like, I just can't get going. And we talked about, when was the last time you like felt good in your movement? And she was like, I used to love gymnastics as a kid. And we just went through the tick box, and she's done yoga forever. And I was like, why don't you just look for an adult gymnastics class in your neighborhood, in your area? And when I tell you, the next time I saw her, the literal joy on her face, she's like, I've been going to gymnastics class, and I did a back handspring. I'm like, you did a back handspring? Like, there's just, I think that sometimes we get so entrenched in this, like, I'm an adult and I'm going to do fitness. So I need to get on a treadmill, or I'm 35, so I should run a marathon, or I'm going to do a high rocks, or I'm going to do a yoga teacher training. I'm going to go to Bali. Like, we have these snippets of things that we think count. And it's like, that's not everything counts. Yeah. The idea is to move your body, to find a way to move better, to feel better, to exist and have agency, so that you can get on the ground and pick up your kids without doing that groan that we all do after 30, right? The idea is that you can be resilient if you take a tumble, if you take a fall. Yeah. So finding something that does that doesn't have to be like, I'm going to run a marathon. Generally, and the research like holds out pretty strong, that if you enjoy something, you will do it. Yeah. But when you just feel like, I should do this, I have to do this, it's really hard to stick to it. Yeah. So I usually feel like you have to enjoy it. If I enjoy loud music, as I do, then being in a place with loud music is going to make me want to go more, right? Yeah. Those things are important. And so assessing sort of like your sensory needs, your emotional needs, your movement needs can answer that question for you like really quickly when you actually dig
when
down.
You ask yourself.
When you ask yourself, yeah, when you're like, what do I like? Like, even if it's not movement related, you're like, I enjoy concerts. Okay. Yeah. Well, like, let's pay attention to that, and how can we create that and just surround it with movement? You know?
I think that's sort of the danger, right, of like influence and looking at, okay, this is what works for this particular person. I should do the exact same thing. So that's key for sure.
It's easy to get wrapped up in like what the trends, the things are. Yeah. Like, maybe you really love Pilates, or like maybe Pilates is having a moment and it's cool. You can do Pilates, but it doesn't have to mean that like, it's okay also if it's not your thing, you know?
So I think one of the obvious questions that maybe listeners are having at this point, right, is like, well, these two, you know, they teach yoga, but they're just telling us we don't even need to do yoga. So what is the value of yoga in speaking about the collective? Because I think from like the philosophy standpoint of yoga, there's an incredible wealth that we haven't even got to, because we've been speaking about the physical. But yeah, I guess the first question I will ask you is that as yoga teachers, what is our responsibility in addressing the things that are going on in the world around us, you know, that context essentially for the yoga?
Yeah. And I think it's a really valuable distinction, like, because it is, I always have that fear when I start talking about other physical disciplines, and I'm like, they're going to stop doing yoga. Don't stop doing yoga. I don't want you to stop doing yoga. I just want you to do yoga, and everything could be an and, right? And I think that part of it is that we associate yoga as just this physical thing. So we're like, well, how am I supposed to weight train and go to a spin class and go bouldering and like go to a dance church thing and do yoga? It's too much. You're right. It's too much. But doing yoga is not just the asana. So yeah, asana is a part of your life. But I think when we identify with yoga only as the asana, we are not only doing a disservice to the actual discipline, the lineage, and we are putting ourselves in a questionable questionable place in terms of cultural context. But also, we are missing the thing, right? And we are misaligning ourselves with an identity that actually is really powerful and can push you into that place of more collectivism, because that can exist anywhere. Like we said, it can be hard to make it or feel like it exists in the yoga studio or in your practice. But the task, in my interpretation, has never been to make it happen on your mat, right? It's the time on your mat is the like rejuvenation, the energy, the power. It is the practice of exercising that, of like fueling that fire. So then you get the fuck off your mat and do it everywhere else, right? Because it is like, the saying, you can't, I'm going to butcher it, but you can't fill someone's cup. You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yes.
You can't pour from an empty cup.
Yes.
And I think that really lends to this individualized thing where we're like, well, I got to get on my mat. I got to fill my cup and I can't pour into anyone's. I can't, right? Or like I can't be in a relationship until I'm totally healed. And I think that's a lovely impetus and a really well-intentioned mindset. And I think it really misses the universal truth that I would hope yoga teaches us, which is everyone's cup is a different size. And so if you are lucky enough to have like a Home Depot size orange bucket of a cup and someone else has a teacup, then yeah, yours isn't full, but you can spare.
You can spare.
Right? So to continue to fill your cup until it's overflowing while other people's are dry, that is a real misunderstanding, I think, of the purpose on the mat and the time. Is it like, yes, these tools are for you, but in theory, this is a collective liberation, which means you have to get off of your mat and outside of yourself and engage with it, whether it's through teaching or service and seva work or whatever it is. There's a lot of ways. It doesn't have to be this like, I think sometimes it feels daunting, but it also just means that you have to take the blinders off and get off your mat a lot of times.
As you're speaking to pouring from our big cup into people who have a smaller cup at this time, I'm really thinking of the ripple effect that is the possibility of yoga. And I don't know about you, but I feel like yoga teachers in that way, we are uniquely positioned to provide people with lots of tools like that in an undistracted space, usually, as long as they're not allowed to have tripods and phones and all the things, right? Which guilty, but but generally speaking, we do have access to people in a focused time of their day, which is, wow. I mean, that is the most valuable currency, is our attention, essentially. So I would ask you, do you think that the ripple effect of yoga could change the world?
I feel like this is not the answer that you want, but I know.
Okay. It's okay. Somebody's dared to tell me no.
I don't say that because I don't think yoga is impactful in all the things that you just said.
Yeah.
But I think that it's easy to buy into the fallacy of like trickle down economics and be like, if I do this thing, if my cup overflows, it'll like bustle out to everyone else around me, and it's not to say that it won't, but it's also not to guarantee that it will. And so when we think about can, yoga change the world in that way, I think that, as you said, time, attention is a massive currency. It's a huge one, right? We all get, to varying degrees, get to decide how to spend our time and attention to very varying degrees. So if you have someone, an audience captivated for an hour or for a class or whatever it is, yeah, you can use that currency, I think, for all different kinds of means. And I think that with yoga, yeah, in theory, we can impact those people in classes, but until, the practice or people's lives have the space to receive those things, it doesn't matter what knowledge you spit in 60 or 90 minutes as a teacher. It doesn't matter if you are the most profound, informed, anything, even the most like heartfelt with them teacher. If their lives do not have like the safety, the security, the community support they need to hear that and act on it, it doesn't matter. And so I feel like that's a little bit pessimistic, but like if we don't have the structures in place for people to have access to food and housing and affordable healthcare and all of those things, like one, they're not coming to yoga if they can't have those things, right?
That is a truth.
They're not showing up, they can't afford that $35 drop-in, or they don't have the hour. It's one thing that too, on another note, pushed me a lot more into the gym after having a daughter is you can't bring a kid to yoga. I could when I owned the studio that I used to own with my ex because it was my business and I was like, I make the rules. But after that, it was like, I can't go to yoga, right? But I can bring my daughter to the gym because it's loud and she can play and it's very family oriented. Like my community has always been kind of more village oriented on that side. And so yoga can be really prohibitive for people to even be able to be there and hear the message. It's the cool thing about things being so online and accessible, like as intense as it can be, and as we're all kind of pessimistic about, how much screen time or all that stuff, it is also a really good equalizer because that means that people that could not or would not show up in traditional spaces where we might have that influence, time, or attention, that they can actually engage with the practice. Because otherwise, if our structures aren't set up to allow people the space to actually be there, receive, and make the change, or they're in survival modes for a multitude of institutional reasons, then it doesn't matter. You know what I mean? Like no amount of meditation is going to change systemic poverty. It's just not. And that's not to say that I think I can change it or anything. It's just that I think we can be real about where our impacts lie and how we can, utilize the practice to think of it less of spreading the good word and more of creating more spaces and systems where people have access to the time or affordability or the childcare or whatever it is that allows them to even engage with the practice at a base level.
So what I'm hearing is something that I love, which is that it's not just about the individual actions and changes. It's about systemic change in order for that to really change anything on scale.
Yeah. I mean, it is like when it's don't use plastic straws. It's kind of like that. And I'm not saying anyone should use plastic straws, but I'm saying that at the core, putting the onus back on the consumer, back on as if your plastic straw usage is the problem, is really, really just emblematic of the larger structures that we've all many of us have accepted as just an inevitability. We're like, that's what it is. I'm not going to push back because that's what it is. And it just, my nudge as yoga teachers, and when you have audiences and you have influence, is to that doesn't have to be how it is. You can push back, to resist to whatever, whether it's very quiet dissidence or whether it's, very loud and boisterous. You get to choose how you show up in that and what makes sense for the communities you're in. But to accept that that's just the way that is I just don't think that that's the case. And so I think that when we can acknowledge that it's a much larger structure, then it's easier to unify against, okay, what does it look like? Instead of just, I'm going to buy glass straws. It's we can buy glass straws and we can rally in this other way too.
Yeah.
So it's not an either or.
No, that's key. No, thank you for that.
Yeah.
And in a sense, I would say that I would disagree. I do believe that yoga can change the world, but
I like that people believe people need to, because I don't.
Yeah. Yeah, but I think that I believe it. The Dream of Leadership in Yoga podcast was that I had this question. I'm like, man, imagine if world leaders did meditation and yoga and had more empathy and had a pause before making decisions, right? And so that's kind of the way, that's the way that I have processed it, which again, it's very idealistic, but I like that you have pushed back on this and made us think, yes, of course, it's much bigger than just the individual again.
Yeah. I think it's both though. I think everything you say is true. And imagine if that was the case. And I think there's just this, there's this balance in the intersection of yes, and we haven't seen historically those things to pan out. So what's our approach? You know what I mean? And I think that sometimes we look at yoga because it has these very important, wonderful elements of love and light and peace and balance and nonviolence and all of that stuff. But that doesn't mean that it is that negates the action of the practice, right? And so I think that it's both those things that I think everyone could benefit from meditation and time and connection and into their bodiness, this felt sense that yoga is so uniquely good at. I also think even on the physical side, any of the strength training or other things that I have done, all of them have been enhanced by my yoga practice. My awareness, whether it's felt sense or physical sense, all of it is emboldened by my yoga practice, and it informs everything. So I think that that's very true for all aspects of people's lives.
Yeah.
I just think we got to find ways to make it more realistic for people to have these practices parts of their lives in like a culturally appropriate way, and also in an accessibility way that is easier said than done. It's very easy for me to say all these things here, and it's much harder to put them into practice on a large scale. But I think acknowledging them is the start that I think gets us a little bit more onto that other path.
Yeah. And you're somebody that I see post about things, even in sort of like the political nature of yoga and everything like that. And I think there's a lot of fear for many of us to speak out in those ways. And so before we get to the wrap-up question, but I would ask you, do you think yoga is political?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, 100%. I think to assume that yoga or anything is not political is just to perhaps, and oftentimes with good intention of like, I don't want to engage with that, it's too hard, it's too ever, is to ignore the fact that everything is political. Your roads are political, right? They're paid for by taxes, right? Your kid's school is political, whether you want it to be or not. Who wrote those textbooks? Where did they come from? Like, everything is political. The stories you've been told, the shows you've watched, there is nothing that has not been touched by it. And that is both unfortunate and like the truth of it. So to have your yoga be non-political is just a little bit to bury your head in the sand. And it doesn't ever, you don't have to engage with it in all the same ways. But I think that between like the context of general modern reality and the context of where yoga, where we pull back to the texts and we see yogis rally against the priestly higher classes who wanted to gatekeep the access to these rituals to liberation and say, okay, well, we need 16 fires and we need 42 goats and we need all these things. And what does that mean? It means only people with means, with access, with proximity get these powerful practices. And it's kind of like same, but different, right? So realistically,
now we need $35 drop-in.
now you need a $35 drop-in, and you need childcare. It's like what's that one meme that goes around that says, you have the same 24 hours in your day as Beyonce?
Yes.
It's like, no, you don't. No, I don't. Like, how long do you have to commute to work, right? Do you have to drop your kids off? Do you have to make your dinner? Do you have to do extra school when you get home from work? Like, it's just not the case. And so I think that, when we can find more ways to like continue to democratize the practice or make things more accessible in those ways, then we can see like that real change of stuff. But, if we're not still rallying against that, like those barriers, then it's hard for the practice to keep like, providing the power and emboldening that it could.
Mm-hmm. So I guess the final question that I'd ask you, and then we'll move on from this, even though I could go another hour on this subject. I waited so long to get to it. But just again, what is like one little step that you think could be a starting place for a yoga teacher listening that's been, hey, I've been on the side of kind of like positive vibes only. Don't speak to me about the negative. What is one step that you can take into the direction of looking at the context in which you're practicing your yoga and at the suffering in the world and thinking, okay, well, what could I do? What is one little thing I could do?
Okay, so I have two things, if that's okay.
Please.
I feel like one is getting outside of your bubble of practice.
Okay.
Like, I think one of the hard things about yoga is that we have these really powerful lineages that can provide some of that belonging in the container for what we're doing. And at the same time, when we're just on that path and we don't know what's happening in the other towns around us, the other little pockets of yoga, that even something as simple as saying, yeah, I love Ashtanga, I love Rocket, I love Awakening, I love whatever I do, and I'm going to go to a studio I've never been to before, and I'm going to take classes that I've never taken. I'm going to go take a Jivamukti class. I'm going to take a Bhakti class. I'm going to go to whatever it is that you've not done before and make it a habit to engage with the other aspects of this practice. Like, I think that's one thing that doesn't have to feel political or actiony or vulnerable in that way. You're still doing yoga, but as you move through this practice, to just stay in the one lane, I think is yet another version of that conditioning of like, this is what I do and this is what it is. And it kind of continues to bolster the in-group, out-group that is a big like tribalism problem that we have. And so even by just diversifying your experience of yoga and saying, I've never done this style, I've never moved my body like that, I don't know what it's going to feel like and I don't know what the teacher's going to say, is important, right? To expand your overall like advancement of your practice, that it's not about more poses or whatever. It's if you can actually have a full gathering of the ecosystem, this whole thing, then you're going to have a better worldview of what the other people in your community are doing, hearing, saying, engaging in. And that's going to open up a lot of avenues. And then my second one is just to like read more books. Like that's just my plug. I love a bookstore. It's my happy place, like to just wander a bookstore, things like that. Like, but put a stack of books next to your mat. And so if you're not sure what to do, like any of them, it could be a mix. I have a mix of like, you know, like dystopian sci-fi space westerns and then like self-helpy books and yoga books and, you know, whatever it is. But whether it's opening to a page and letting that be your impetus for the practice, or whether it's saying like, if I have 2 hours for practice every day of the week, but I don't think I have enough time to engage civically or to read or to learn, I think that as a yoga practitioner who's dedicated to that, you can also say, I have 90 minutes for practice and I have 30 minutes to pick up this book. I have 30 minutes to read bell hooks. I have 30 minutes to read a book on the U.S. foster care system, on whatever it is.
Yeah.
Like it can be anything. And it could be a yoga book. It could be, like I said, I think there's a lot of value in just getting out of your head and into someone else's imagination. I love a fantasy story.
Do you have a book recommendation that you often recommend to people if they ask you something like, what book changed your life?
Oh my God, I don't have a single book that changed my life. But I'm also like, I have like 16 things going on at once all the time. But my advice for a lot of people is to, if they feel overwhelmed by the intensity of the world and the things that are going on, is to pair yourself one book or one thing that allows you to dissociate. Like you are allowed to have an escape. Everyone is allowed to escape, to be expected to engage with this stuff or even just the practice all the day, every day is going to lead to burnout. It's too much, right? Our systems are not designed for it. So I do that. I love nerdy sci-fi stuff. I like comic-y things and manga and stuff. So like, yeah, I'm going to listen to like a 5-part book series about a world that doesn't exist and magical powers because I need to be in someone else's imagination and get out of here. And simultaneously, I am also a big history nerd. So I'm going to pick up some sometimes historical fiction or something that is rooted in learning.
Yeah.
So maybe you can mix them. Sometimes you can get some historical, you know, liberty type of fantasy work. But I think that giving yourself some outlets to both learn and escape is a really helpful pairing that just can make a world of difference. So yeah, I don't have like a one that changes all. I just think that picking up something.
Pick one up, please.
Pick something up. Like I just think that you can afford to spend less time in a handstand. I love handstands unless you can read upside down and you can, you know, little by little. So those are my practices that aren't your norm and more books.
So we've made it all the way to the end of the episode. And the last question is the billboard question. And the idea is that if you had a billboard that was going to be seen by everybody in the world, what would you put on your billboard?
Okay. I read this question when you sent it to me because, like, spoiler alert, you sent it to me ahead of time. I'm sorry. And I read it and then I was like, oh, I don't know. And then I just put it away and pretended like I wasn't going to have to actually answer it because it does feel like so much pressure to think about that.
Yeah, the ultimate platform.
Yeah, and I kept just coming back to, like, what are the little mantras that I have? Like, I'm a person who's got some anxiety and some rabble up here. So, like, what are the things that I tell myself that maybe someone else needs to hear? I feel like that could be on a billboard. So I always come back to a Mac Miller lyric that I really like.
Okay.
That is, it is what it is till it ain't. And for whatever reason, that has always carried me through those moments where you're like, things feel overwhelming. I need to get out of here, right? Okay, well, it is what it is till it ain't. It's impermanent. This is impermanence. This is not forever, right? It is non-attachment. Whatever it is, even if it's lovely, it's not forever. So how do we value it while it's here? That, like, for me, it encompasses that you can do anything for 30 seconds or whatever that like thing you need to know that both it's not forever, good news, and both it's not forever, bad news.
Yeah.
So Mac Miller, words of wisdom.
Yeah, this is a moment in time. I mean, this was a moment in time.
Yes.
And now we're at the end of it. It was so beautiful. Let people know where they can find you and practice with you, because I know that you've just started Moved. So tell us about, where we can continue to learn from you.
Yeah, you can learn from me at movedu.org, or Moved is the app, Moved Studio. And this is where I do all of my yoga, whether it's online, whether it is in-person events or intensives. This is where I house my yoga school. So teacher trainings, 200 and 300, or continuing education, pretty much just like whatever my curiosity is stuck on for the moment. That's what we're doing modules on. And then the app also has strength training. So it has dedicated programs. It has mobility. It's just got like all the stuff that my brain likes delivered to you.
Oh, that sounds so lovely. Yeah, we'll be sure to link all of that in the show notes.
Thank you.
And if you're listening, thank you for making it all the way to the end of the episode. Perhaps we'll practice with you online or in person one of these days.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Carlene.